YouTube, what's going on, man? Got another video review for you guys. This one's going to be more of a direct head-to-head comparison of two of these very fine scopes versus what I traditionally do, so a little bit different. I normally do individual reviews, not a whole lot of direct comparisons, although that is coming. But the reason I decided not to do individual reviews of these two scopes is because honestly, they've been around the block for a while. There's a ton of other reviews out there about them. If you guys really want me to do an individual review on each one, I will. But at the moment, I figure you guys have either already shot these before because they're incredibly common. I'm sure a lot of you guys have them. Or you've seen them plenty at your matches, at your local ranges, and all that kind of stuff. And what we have here today is the Leupold MK5. This is a 5-25 version in the FDE, and this is the Zeiss S3 in the 6-36 flavor. All right, and some of you guys may be wondering why these two, they're not exactly comparable in terms of magnification range, but they are similar in price point. And to that end, they represent what I think right now are the top two options in the production class category of PRS. Now, production class. I feel like that's a trigger word for a lot of people, or trigger words. I don't want to get into the discussion about the merits and whether we should or shouldn't and the rules and all that kind of stuff surrounding production class. I mean, that in and of itself will be a 3-hour video and people will argue back and forth till they're blue in the face. But as it currently sits, for those of you that don't know, production class is a class where, by rule, the rifle as a whole, not including optic and mount, but the rifle as a whole must be $3,000 or less from the manufacturer's website. It can't be a rifle that you put together with a bunch of parts that equal less than that amount. It has to be a readily available rifle. All right, and the optic, just the price of the optic, they don't include the mount in production class. The optic has to be $2,500 or less from the manufacturer website. So it doesn't count if you get, a $3,000 scope on some crazy Black Friday sale for, $2,000 or $2,200 or, some used price of less than $20. No. The manufacturer advertised price as new on the manufacturer's website has to be $2,500 or less to qualify for production class. All right. So both of these fit under that niche, basically right at the threshold of $2,500, but they're supposed to represent a great bang for the buck, if you will. Now, for a lot of people, spending $2,000 or $2,500 on a scope is a lot of money regardless. So it's kind of tongue-in-cheek to say bang for the buck or a bargain scope, if you will. For a lot of people, a bargain scope is $1,000 or less. But having said that, production class is very interesting. It doesn't get a ton of market share, and again, I don't want to argue about the merits and unmerits, but really, you want people to feel comfortable shooting any class and be competitive within that class. And I think these two scopes give you the biggest option to be competitive in that class. Now, yes, there are a bunch of cheaper options that you can shoot and whatnot. I just don't think they're as good as these. So, without further ado, I want to compare, and as you see, I have the whiteboard here. Hopefully you guys can read it. First time I'm trying out the whiteboard. I'm essentially going to list out some of the different features of each scope on the whiteboard, so at the end of the video we can kind of go over what is more valuable to you as a shooter and which one of these you may prefer. Whether you're going production class or not, maybe you're just looking and $2,500 is the max that you want to spend on a scope, or maybe you have 3 or 4 rifles that you need to outfit with the same scope. Spending $2,500 a scope is a lot easier on the wallet than spending $4,000 on a scope for a tier 1 scope like a ZCO or a Tangent, etc. So let's get right into it, man. I'm going to be going, again, head-to-head with these, so we'll be going back and forth. And I hope you guys enjoy this one. Let's take a look from the top side. All right, guys. So once again, 5-25 on the Leupold, 6-36 on the Zeiss. So let me bring them up pretty close here. As you can see, they're basically the same size. The Leupold a little bit longer. We'll start at the back and move forward. Both of them have the fast focus style of eyepiece. So you just twist, there's no locking mechanism, and no real indicator marks on either one. So you'll have to either tape it or mark it with a Sharpie yourself or whatever the case is. Magnification ring. The Leupold is kind of your standard magnification ring. It's marked from 5 at the bottom, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, you know, so on and so forth, with different intervals all the way to 25 at the top end, right? With the dot here on the ocular body of the scope to indicate where your magnification is set. The Zeiss is a little bit different. So this one obviously goes 6 on the low end and has a tick mark, even if in some places it doesn't have the physical number, for every single magnification range all the way up to 36. So you can literally put it at exactly 33 power if you want. Obviously, it's assuming the markings are accurate. Not every scope has accurate markings, but if you trust it, then you can go pretty much magnification wherever you want. Most guys just kind of crank up till it looks good, and that's about it. The indicator is actually, as you can see here, a little triangle, and it is on the actual magnification ring. So it's not on the body, and the numbers are on the body. So essentially reverse of the way that Leupold presents it. Now, throw levers. I don't have one on the Zeiss here. It's in the box. It comes with one. But there are 3 different places here on the magnification ring where you can essentially index that throw lever. You just remove the little cap screw and it threads right in. And you can do that based on a few different things. If you're shooting a left-handed or a right-handed rifle, so you can avoid hitting the bolt on it, as well as just have it kind of in the center so that you know that it's always going to kind of be in the middle so that it doesn't favor one side or the other. I do like that option because it gives you options, whereas the Leupold is just kind of this one big center stack, and it just kind of indexes right at about 16, 17 power if you want it directly at the 12 o'clock position. So you kind of know where it is relative. So if your throw lever is straight, then you know that you're about 16, 17 power. Different strokes for different folks. I will say that the tension of the magnification lever is much nicer on the Zeiss. The Zeiss just feels good, and that's why I didn't throw the throw lever on here. I didn't want this. The throw lever that comes with the Zeiss is pretty long, and it's just like a stick. But this one didn't need it. There's plenty of really good texture on the magnification ring. It is aluminum. It's not rubber or anything like that. And the tension on it is fantastic. So didn't feel the need for an extra piece on the scope, such as the throw lever, but one is included if you like to run one. All right. Moving forward, both of these, this one is a 34 millimeter main tube. The Leupold, as we know, is a 35 millimeter main tube. So take that in consideration. If you don't have any 35 millimeter rings and you pick up a Leupold, you'll have to get some 35 millimeter rings for it. The scope options here in the center saddle is where things kind of differentiate a little bit. So this one has the PR2 reticle, which is one of my favorite reticles. I've used it a ton, and as I use it more, I really like how clean and open it looks, and I just love the overall concept. Leupold, being Leupold, has a habit of Leupolding things, which means it's a term you may hear around the community where basically it means that on paper it looks really good, and then they find some way of making it less than really good. PR2, no option for illumination. Now, a lot of you guys may be saying, well, I use that maybe 0 times a year. Fair, but when you're competing against other scopes in a similar price point, it's one less feature that you have, number one. Number two, on the PRS calendar, typically once, sometimes in the past twice a year, there have been night matches. And for a night match without an illuminated reticle, you are absolutely a madman. to go and try to shoot that. You would basically be the shooting equivalent of Stevie Wonder. And I love Stevie Wonder, but we all know that he's probably blind, although there's been a lot of rumors. Anyway, I digress. Point being that Leupold being Leupold, to this day, with the Mark V being out for so long, they've actually introduced the Mark IV HD, a totally new line of scopes, and they still haven't illuminated the damn thing. So, Leupold, please, guys, just for the love of God, illuminate the PR2. And I don't want to hear any excuses about the reticle's too thin, this and that, because other companies do it with thinner reticles. They do. It's facts. I can bring out a diagram of a bunch of different reticles that are the same line thickness or thinner that are fully illuminated with minimal bleed. Okay? And I think that you got to do that to be competitive in that space. The Zeiss, as I'm sure you guys have seen in a multitude of reviews, has illumination, and goddamn, it's bright. It is true daytime brightness. Now, I don't use illumination to shoot matches during the day. I have shot night matches before and definitely want illumination there. But if you're one of those people that struggles to pick up the reticle, it can be illuminated to a very, very bright daytime setting, like a true daytime setting. But only the center of the reticle illuminates. I'll try to roll in an image here. This is a AI generated image, but it'll essentially kind of tell you what portion is illuminated. So it's not the entire reticle. So it also wouldn't be my favorite for night matches because you'd have to really dial in most of your wind for every stage because you don't have a ton of wind to hold. You don't get the full horizontal stadia, but something is better than nothing. All right. Then let's move on to the Parallax. All right. So Parallax on the Zeiss, the throw is very good. It's very long to get from one end to the other. It is at 10 meters is the bottom end, all the way to infinity with no markings. It's got a ring that sort of gradually gets a little bit thicker, or a band, I should say, that gradually gets a little bit thicker, and it uses most of a full turn, I'd say 80% of a full turn to get from 10 meters to infinity. In my experience, though, the Parallax was pretty forgiving, through different center fire distances. And I didn't shoot any rimfire with either scope, but you can definitely use the Zeiss for rimfire because it does give you that 10 meter minimum parallax. The Mark V, on the other hand, the lowest marked yardage on here is 75, which is a pretty high minimum, if you will. Most scopes that don't have a super low minimum are at least at 50. However, if you take a look here, you can actually go, this is the 75, and you can go below it a little bit. Now, it's unmarked, so I don't know exactly what that means. You can get it to focus a little bit closer, but then you also have to play with magnification and things like that. So essentially not ideal. I would never take a Mark V to a rimfire match. The new Mark IV is better suited for that. But yeah, so the Mark V just gives you less on the bottom end. I've also never shot a stage inside of 100 yards at a centerfire match, and even then the 100-yard stages that I have shot were, group stages for accuracy, where, tightest group or some sort of like paper hostage, or the old Atlas playing cards, one shot closest to center wins type of deal. Plenty fine for that. But again, not a scope that I would put in multiple roles. So if you're one of those people that either wants to play musical scopes and switch your scope from centerfire to rimfire, or you're one of those people that wants to have the same optic across both all your centerfires and rimfires, then the Zeiss is going to make that a lot easier for you because of that minimum parallax distance. All right. Let's move on to the elevation turrets of each one. Obviously, physically, the Zeiss elevation turret is much larger than the Leupold. The Leupold does have the numbers going all the way around. As you can see, I have the white turret label, the speed tape, if you will, to mark with a Sharpie the dope that I have to dial for stages, so you can't see that third row. You can also get the competition dial, which essentially eliminates that third row and makes the numbers a lot bigger. I do have that, but I just decided to stick with this for now. and the competition dial is black and it doesn't match the FDE because FDE rules the world on scopes, right? Zeiss will give you indications for the first revolution and the second revolution. All right, so you got to do a little math there. They're both, well, sort of 10 mils. So the Zeiss is 10 mils per turn exactly, and the Leupold kind of offsets, which is an interesting concept, and they've done this for a while, but it's 10.5 mils per turn, so that essentially on the second revolution, your full mils are now in between, so the numbers don't stack on top of each other, so it's a little bit easier to see. So 11 mils is essentially also the same as where my 0.5 mil mark is. So that's an interesting concept. Turn indicators. The Zeiss is a translating turret, so that means it physically moves up and down with line indications, as you can see here. Right, so very similar to like Night Force is a super popular one that's got translating turrets, etc. And the zero stop on this is a clutch style system, essentially, if you will. And the Leupold is a zero stop with a zero lock. The zero stop is built into the scope itself, so you can't set it the way you can, on something else to whatever you want. If you depress the zero lock, you can go 5/10 below center if you need it, but by default, it'll just lock at 0 when you spin it back down, right? The indicators for this are a couple. Your first revolution indicator is going to be this zero lock detent actually going flush. So even though it's at 0, if you're on the second revolution, it will not lock back at 0. It sits flush with the body of the dial. Your third revolution indicator is going to be the fact that it recesses and this pin protrudes from the top. So you can see the silver pin here, and you can see now how the zero lock button has actually recessed. So it's not flush, it's physically recessed inside of the turret. So that's essentially your third revolution that will get you all the way around, and there's nothing past that. Then you just go all the way back down to 0. And so you'll know you're on the first rev because as you climb down from essentially what would be 11, the button will start to come back out. So if I'm at a true 7 mil, my button is fully exposed again, right? And then just boom, and it locks right back at 0. Does not lock at any other position other than 0 on the Leupold. All right. Both of them are kind of similar in turret removal. It's Allen. This one's Allen key, 2 screws. The Zeiss. One of my biggest contentions with the Zeiss is that it's a Torx, but not only is it a Torx, it's an oddball Torx, and it's different from the Windage. So I'll just go ahead and get straight into that. I think that's one of the dumbest things I've ever fucking seen in my entire life. I don't know who in the boardroom sat there and signed off on this idea and said it was a great idea that we're going to have a T6 and a T8. Huh? You got what? A T6 and a T8? So the elevation, you just loosen the set screws and you can pop the turret off. And then on the Windage, you have one singular, basically like inside cap that sits right here. And that's how you reset the 0 on the Windage. But again, T6 and T8. So not only do you need Torx instead of Allens, you need 2 different sizes and 2 sizes that most people don't commonly have. Now, I'm lucky enough that I happen to carry a set of Torx from like a T4, I think, all the way to like a T30. It's in this like little kit, but that's because I've run into testing out different gear and other shit like that. I've run into a multitude of issues, so I've got my bases covered. But what? Not something that guys typically carry in their toolkit just offhand. So if you take this scope out of the box, And if I remember correctly, it's also in the box that it does come with an Allen key, but now you got to carry that one. So if you just grab this scope right out of the box and jump to the range, you're going to get there and be like, fuck, I can't set my zero. Can't reset the turrets. Ton of elevation in both. You guys can read the spec sheets. The only time I could ever see you really needing the full elevation is like 22 ELR, or I mean, I guess true ELR, but you know, you've got Parallax and other shit like that. So more than enough for any common modern centerfire rifle cartridge at a typical PRS match. Also more than enough at your typical 22 distances for like NRL 22 and NRL 22X. All right. So elevation's not a problem at all. What I will say on the Zeiss, going back to it very quickly, is if you guys can see here, the numbers are massive, and they also include the numbers for every half mil. So you can go 0, you can go 0.5, you can go 1, 1.5, etc., all the way around, right? That does stop on the second revolution, where it only goes 10, then 11, but because it says 0.5, you could just easily go 10, 10.5, so on and so forth, right? So if you're one of those people that struggles to see numbers on tiny turrets, and maybe you've got a little bit older eyes, or you've got some bad vision, you wear glasses, things like that, the Zeiss are nice and white and bright, super crispy, super easy to read, and you'll have no issues with them at all. Turret feel. The clicks themselves, I think, are more distinct on the Zeiss. Actually, matter of fact, I know they are. Just literally turning it right now. It is a much more distinct, let me bring it up to the microphone here, feel for each individual click. Now, for scopes in this price range, I'm not super picky as long as they're pretty decent, right? But this is great tension. You can turn it fast, so you don't feel like you're fighting the turret if it's too much tension, but it's not mushy, so you never miss a click. Leupold is a little bit softer. They've got good sound, but a little bit softer, and obviously the numbers are on a more low profile turret. So while the first revolution is pretty big, especially if you get the competition turret, if you ever need to get into that second revolution, then it can be a little bit tough to see. And I'll bring it here for the clicks. So a little less pronounced in the individual click on the Leupold, but I do also love the tension on the Leupold. It's super easy to dial very quickly. If I have a stage where I need to go from, say, 2 to 4, I can get there super quick, just like that, right? Same thing with the Zeiss. Let's say I have a stage where I need to go 1 to 3, 1 to 3, 1 to 3. Very easy, very easy. So tension on both of them is absolutely fantastic, with more pronounced clicks in terms of feel to the Zeiss. It's almost as if the groove, I'm trying to explain this. If you imagine like a V-cut for the body of the turret, and then the upper part in the spleen like goes into that V, it seems like the V is cut a little bit deeper in the Zeiss, and the V is cut a little bit shallower in the Leupold, right? I don't know if that's really getting across to you guys, but essentially it just feels like it's got a little deeper, more positive feel. Not to say that the Leupold is terrible, but on the Zeiss, all right? The Windage. Oh boy, the Windage. If you guys have ever seen me on other podcasts and stuff like that talk about the Leupold MK5 Windage, you already know where I stand, but we're going to get into that. And let's start with the Zeiss before I go on a soliloquy here. So the Zeiss Windage is a locking windage. Pull out to unlock, turn it, push back in to lock, right? Now, again, it uses a different Torx size, and it's only one screw for the center cap here, as opposed to like your standard on most rifle scopes where it has around the body of the turret housing a couple of set screws that you got to release and then reset to 0, etc. All right. Now, one interesting feature that I appreciate about the Zeiss that I've never seen another company do, to be honest, and it just kind of dummy proofs the way that you do windage. Real quick, how many of you guys have ever dialed wind the wrong way? Hi, dumbass alert. Yeah, that's me. I'm sure plenty of you guys have as well, whether it's actually on a stage or you're just zeroing and you're like, oh, I'm off to the left. Let me just crank it this. Oh, shit, now I'm even more left. Yep, let me come back the other way because I'm an idiot. They actually put, I'm going to try to get this in frame for you guys here. They actually put little bullet icons facing in the direction. So you know if you need your bullet to come this way because you missed over here, turn it towards that side. Boom. And if you need your impact to go that way, then turn it this way. So, you know, it's without having to remember the left and the right and all that. I think it's pretty cool. I think especially for new shooters or somebody that never has dialed wind and is just kind of getting into it a little bit and you want to try dialing some wind at your next match and next time you're at the range and things like that, it's just one step that they took to help dummy proof the optic a little bit and to help you guys waste a couple rounds going in the wrong direction. And it doesn't hinder anything. The icons are super small. They don't take up a lot of space. And I think it's a nice touch, personally. Right? They also have the indication that tells you push back in to lock it. I mean, we all know how locking turrets work, and these are just traditional pull out, push in. But they do have that marked. The numbers are absolutely massive. And another thing that I appreciate about the way Zeiss did their windage is when you pull out, that while the arrow stays on the body of the scope, it reveals a line that continues, so you don't have a massive gap of blank space between what you're actually trying to dial. So you can see exactly where you're at. So that's 5/10 of right windage, or 1 mil of right windage, etc. So I know exactly where I'm at. It's easy to read. It's a nice thin line. And the other thing that they did is they moved the line so it's not in line with the body scope like a lot of other scopes are, but it's actually sitting a little bit higher, a la Schmidt-Bender, what Leupold attempted to do, so that essentially what you can do is when you're looking through the rifle scope, you pop your head up, and yes, you got to do the gopher, but a lot of people will do the gopher to dial their elevation. So essentially when you go to dial your elevation to the next target, you can also physically see without having to cock your head over. You can physically see with minimal head raise where your windage is at if you were dialing wind for a stage, or to make sure you didn't have any wind dialed in for the stage, or whatever the case is, you can check that. So it's a little pop-up, but does make that a nice feature over something that's directly in line and you got to cock your head over a little bit like that. All right. Leupold windage, man. Leupold windage. Probably the epitome of Leupolding a fucking product. Or a feature, I should say. Yeah, dude. So they tried to do a similar concept where they put the marking up top at the 45. Now, I don't want to take it off, but you guys can see that this is the DI Precision windage turret. So essentially what it does is, because Leupold comes with a capped windage, and essentially the threads for the capped windage end up creating like a blank space between the marking on the turret and the body marking here for the windage. And so it kind of can give you a little bit of an error if you're trying to do it quick on the clock, dial wind or whatever the case is, where you're like, fuck, is that really like 0.2 or is that 0.3? And then you got to go back to 0 and you think it's at 0, and then you got to like count 1 click, 2 clicks, that type of thing. And so it's a little bit harder to see. And the other thing is that, so this line is sitting straight. Like, it's not a point like this triangle here and then a line that extends physically sideways. Like, this line is it's just at a really interesting spot where even with this competition dial, it's just not exact enough. The line is a little bit too thick, I think, and it's just sitting at a weird angle. Like, you got to make it come out of the body horizontally. It's kind of sitting like vertically almost, like or straight, like on a straight plane. And it's just weird, man. And like, depending on what angle you look at it from, you could almost get confused. Like, damn, am I in between clicks? Or like, is that really 0 windage, or is that 0.1? And there's no locking for the windage either. Now, I mean, it does have good positive feel on it for the most part. It's very muted though. Check this out. So very muted, but it's got a decent feel to it versus the Zeiss. Very crispy. Right? So you don't, but also because the Zeiss is marked so well and done properly, even with that, what I'll call like a 45 degree or elevated body indicator, because that was done properly, you don't even need to rely on feel and sound to count the clicks of what your windage is at. Whereas the Leupold, you kind of do. Yeah, it's just not, it's not fantastic at all. So that needs to be redone, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people share that sentiment. The fact, and for those of you guys that may be arguing, well, it's fine, I've never had an issue with it. Okay, cool, good for you, and the way that you shoot obviously doesn't run into any of those issues. But what I will say is that when you have to have a third-party company make a new windage dial because people are complaining about the way that your windage dial is set up, that should speak volumes to the fact that there's a fucking problem. They have sort of gotten a little bit better with the Mark IV, the new Mark IV that came out. That one does have a 0 lock on it, similar to this one. I haven't spent any time with the Mark IV at all yet. I want to at some point. So it looks like it's marked a little bit better, but not entirely better. So we'll have to see. But on the Mark Vs, as they currently sit, windage, not great. All right. And that kind of takes us through the end of the center section. And that's it. Forward of that, both have 56 millimeter objectives. In the box, you do get a sunshade with the Leupold, a very nice sunshade. It's like 4 or 5 inches long. In the FDE ones, they are color matched, so it is FDE. In the Zeiss, you don't. You have to buy that. With the Leupold, you get very basic flip caps, but they are better than nothing flip caps. I don't run caps on my scope, so I don't super care, but for those of you that do, they are usable. They're not the greatest things in the world. They're like one step above Butler Creeks, but they're nowhere close to like Tenebrex or, you know, even the MK Machining 3D printed ones or the Adland ones or some of the other scope caps that are out there. But it does give you something, so you feel like you got something for your money. Other accessory that comes with this particular, or not this, but all Mark Vs is a knob. So this throw lever is actually not the standard one. This one's called the Bone Spur. All right. This is from Flatline Ops, the company that makes scope levels. And I like this one because you can actually see through it, which is nice because it doesn't block the elevation turret if I want to take a quick peek at where my elevation is at. The standard nub that comes with the Mark V, I'm sure you guys have all seen it, just screws into the threaded hole that's here, and it's just a solid little nub. But it does give you something. So some guys run it, some guys don't, but you feel like you're getting a good value for your purchase because you're getting that, right? So once again, sunshade, scope caps, throw lever, included with the Mark V. The Zeiss, you get a big white box. Yeah, I mean, you can buy Zeiss scope covers and you can buy a sunshade, and they're not terribly expensive. I think the sunshade's like $50 or something like that. But clearly, they tried to save a little bit to meet a price point by taking out some of those accessories, which I'm not super mad at. you know, obviously, obviously, if they felt like they wanted to target that 2,500 and under price range, and with the quality of this scope, which is excellent quality, if the only way to do that was to take away some of those accessories, otherwise the scope was going to be, you know, $2,700, $2,800, then I 100% support the decision, because if this scope was $3,000, to me, it's not competitive in that market. The way that the S3 currently sits, it's very competitive at the 2,500 and under market. Above that, closer to 3K, not competitive. It's just not. And I'll get into some of that now, where we can talk about reticles and glass and some of those other things. All right, so a lot of you guys are going to wonder where that's at. Reticle options. Let's talk about that first. I think Leupold naturally gets a win here. The reticle options are more. So if you're a Horus fan, they've got, you know, Horus options. They've got the TMR option, which is illuminated. They've got an MOA option, only one, I believe, or maybe two now, because you can get the PR1 and MOA. They've got a multitude of different mill options, but obviously the PR2 is probably the most popular, which is an excellently done reticle, one of my favorites. And reticles are a personal preference, but I give Leupold the win just based on the fact that because it is a personal preference, they have more options to meet your personal preference. Zeiss has two reticle options, and neither one of them are the same. They have one reticle for mill and one reticle for MOA. They're not bad. In my opinion and my preferences, they need some tweaks. But at the end of the day, they only give you one option for each. So regardless if you're an MOA shooter, you get one reticle that's not the same as the mill. It looks vastly different than what the mill reticle looks like. So it's like, fuck, it's not even the same reticle, just on a MOA scale, and vice versa. The mill reticle is not the MOA version on a mill scale. So if neither one of the reticles is to your fancy, you're shit out of luck. Both of them are illuminated, but it's only one of each option, right? And to me, the Zeiss reticle is just too thick. To me, it's too thick. Now, going back to kind of what I mentioned about the way that the turrets are marked in big and bold numbers and all that kind of stuff, if you're someone that struggles to see thinner reticles, if you're someone that has a hard time reading reticles because of eyesight, you know, somebody that's a little bit older, you need glasses, things like that, the Zeiss reticle is going to work well for you. It's thick, it's clearly marked. Every full mill is marked, so a lot of scopes will do the thing where it's like 1, then 2 is unmarked, 3 is marked, 4 is unmarked, 5 is marked, etc. down the line, just to give, you know, a little bit of a cleaner feel. Exactly how the PR2 is, except the PR2, 1 is unmarked, 2 is marked, 3 is unmarked, 4 is marked, and I'm talking about the main horizontal stadia here. The Zeiss marks every single one, and it marks the vertical stadia above the center line every full mill. So you have 3 mills above center, and they are all clearly marked with 1, 2, and 3. Going down the tree, it is not. Down the tree, every even mill is marked, so 2, 4, 6, 8, every odd is unmarked. But the markings are very clear, gives you a ton of data, and for me, it was just too thick. Like, the physical stadia lines are just, it's just too thick, and it looks just too bold. I'm also a shooter that typically shoots at a little bit higher power, and I get that this reticle they essentially tried to make it work from as low a minimum magnification range as they could, all the way up to 36. So you gotta imagine, like, I can still see the lines pretty clearly at 6 power, but at 36 power, I guess that's a sort of a byproduct of making it usable at 6 power. Is at 36, it just takes up a lot. Now, physically, because it's a first focal plane, like, the reticle doesn't actually change thicknesses. I'm just saying that overall it started too thick at the bottom end, right? So like on my Razor 3, for example, that's also a 6-36 optic. At 6, the reticle is very thin and mostly useless. Like, you can kind of use it as a duplex, but you can't really read any of the subtension marks on it. but it looks great at that 20 power. Like when I shoot my Razor 3, I'm constantly always at like 18 to 22 power in there. And it's fantastic, and I love it in that range. It's nice and thin, doesn't obscure a whole lot and all that kind of stuff. This particular reticle at 20 power is very in your face. Like you can see it. It's very thick. So just not my cup of tea. The other thing that's not my cup of tea is inconsistent 0.5 windage marks on the main horizontal. So if you look closely, you can see that at the 0.5 in every direction, the first 0.5, up, down, left, and right, it's another little aiming dot. And then the full mill is a solid line. 2.5, you now have to bracket. But 0.5 and 1.5 is a small aiming dot. I don't like that. I want like an easy tick mark. I really like the way that ZCO has done the 2/10 on facing down and then the half mil mark sticking up. I really like that. And even the Leupold PR2, excuse me, even though that it's 0.25 base, the half mil mark is easy to find. It's sticking straight up, whereas the 0.25 and 0.75 are pointing down. Right? I don't know. I find that easier to locate in a situation where I need a quick hold, say on a mover. A lot of movers are 1.5. Very easy, boom. Not to say that you couldn't get used to the Zeiss. I don't know, not my flavor. But again, reticles are personal preference. The PR2, you guys have all seen it a bunch. It's a 0.25 base. It's very open, very wide. And it's got a lot of spaces in it, so a lot of the lines don't actually physically connect in the reticle, which just opens it up that much more. That's my type of reticle. I like something very open, something that's easy to see trace with, especially going back to a smaller 6 mil, like when I shoot my dasher and things like that. I like having that empty space so I can watch the trace, and so also it makes it easier to spot where on the plate I hit, or if I missed, where did I miss, things like that. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the PR2 because I'm sure half of you guys watching this either have a PR2 or have shot a PR2 in a Leupold MK5 of some sort. All right. Where the Zeiss is a clear winner is field of view, man. The Mark V to me has one of the worst fucking field of views. I don't think that that's a secret. To me, the eye box has always been tight. And for a lot of you guys, I hear a lot of guys say, oh, it's not that bad. You know, I'm pretty used to it, things like that. But for me, like, especially when I go to like my Razor 3, my Tangent, my ZCO, things like that, and then I go back and I shoot my Mark V, like, fuck, man, I'm looking through a toilet paper tube, dude. Especially when I throw the trigger cam on this thing and it's just, god damn it, it's tight. Hakatua on that thing and open up the field of view a little bit, you know? But yeah, so it's definitely one of the worst in class for a 5 to 25 optic of the major PRS players that I've come across. Whereas the Zeiss is really nice. It's nice, it's big, the eye box is good, and it just, when I was going back and forth between the two, it just kind of felt like a breath of fresh air. Like I'm not claustrophobic anymore, and I can just sit there and enjoy it. But I didn't like the reticle. If I could get this reticle in this scope or this field of view and turret markings and feel into this scope, you know, I think that would be excellent. But I digress. There's no free lunches. Everything's a give and take, and there's no perfect scope. In terms of overall glass quality, oh, hold on. Let me go back to the field of view for a second because I know people are going to ask. So I'm going to put both of them at 20 power based on the indication of the scope. Whether that's actually 20 power or not, I don't have the instrumentation to test that. But I will say that some companies mismark their scopes. So like the Magnification isn't actually what it says. But for those of you that are going to ask, so the main horizontal stadia on the Zeiss only has markings out to 8 mils, right? But at 20 power, it looks like it's a bit over 10 mils on each side, right? At 20 power on the Leupold, I can see here that it is basically 8 3/4, so 8.75 mils on each side. So, I mean, this one, even though there's nothing marked past 8, it is significantly past 8. Like, it's well beyond what 9 mils would be. It's definitely closer to 10 or beyond 10, but I'd say it's a very safe guess that there's 10 mils on either side of this reticle, and I can see that there's only 8 3/4 mils on each side, for those of you wondering what that's going to look like. Glass quality. Oh boy. This is always subjective. People prefer different color patterns, very similar to photography. Some of you guys prefer warmer colors, some prefer cooler colors, things like that. So I'm not going to say that you guys would like one or the other better. What I will say is resolution is pretty good on both of them. I will give the slight overall image resolution a win to the Zeiss. It's not massive. It's not like, you know, fucking tangent level versus this. It's not that. But it is slight. I noticed it a lot when I was looking at the 600-yard targets at the local range that I have here, and just going back and forth, especially on a hot miragey day. The depth of field is pretty good on this Zeiss. I would say it's better than the Mark V. And so, again, the Zeiss is not as good as you know, a ZCO or something like that. But it did provide a little bit better depth of field to kind of separate that mirage a little bit, and even through that mirage, it again, scopes don't cut through mirage, but it did resolve a little bit better, and it was a little bit easier to see bullet impacts on the steel at 600 versus the Mark V. The Mark V for me, and again, sample size of one of each, but the Mark V gets a little muddy. Not terrible, and I mean, shit, you know, the last 2-day match that I shot with the Mark V in open division and came away with a 10th place finish. So, I mean, and the scope certainly didn't hold me back, but just something that I noticed. All right. So that's kind of all I want to say on glass quality. If I got to rate them on a 9 out of 10, and I don't mean that 10 is a tangent, just within the scale of $2,500 and less scopes, I'd put the Zeiss probably at like a 9, and the Leupold at like a 8, 8.5, in terms of just overall glass quality. So very close, and you probably wouldn't notice a ton of difference just in pure glass quality going back and forth from one to the other, without physically having them both next to each other. Having said that, if you're fine with the glass quality of the Mark V, you go to a Zeiss, you probably won't notice a ton of difference. You'll notice it in the field of view, though. You're going to look through it and be like, damn, all right. Kind of like opens up a whole new world. But just in pure glass quality, you won't notice a ton of difference. So I probably wouldn't necessarily say, if you're a Mark V user and you're happy with them, go out and run and buy a bunch of the Zeisses. I probably wouldn't say that. But if you're somebody that has neither one and you're kind of debating, you can take that into a little bit of consideration for sure. All right. And that's pretty much kind of all I want to talk about. So I said I would use the whiteboard. I kind of didn't throughout the video, but I'll just make some quick notes on here so you guys can sort of look at a recap of what we got going here. So we're going to go reticle. I think the Mark V wins here. All right. Again, just purely from an options standpoint. Okay. We'll go with turrets. I think the Zeiss takes the win here. They feel a little bit better, despite the fact that the biggest con is you need 2 different Torxes to zero them out. The markings are better. The windage is much better on the Zeiss. The locking on the windage And the little bullet marks, I feel, give that the win here. All right, let's go Parallax. This one, the Zeiss also wins. It parallaxes down to 10 meters, so plenty capable for a rim fire as well as a center fire. Also, in general, I found the Parallax a little bit more forgiving throughout center fire distances from like 300 to 1,000. It needed a little bit less touch than that. All right. Then here we've got Illum. That's obviously a win for the Zeiss because the Mark V PR2 does not come illuminated. You can get some other reticles illuminated, but the PR2 is far and away the most popular, especially those of you guys watching this for a PRS or a rimfire competition standpoint specifically. And you know, you never know when you might go shoot a night match. All right. Next, let's go glass. And I've also got to give that win to the Zeiss because I'm going to incorporate field of view in that. And the field of view is better in the Zeiss. It resolves a little bit better as well, but if it was just resolution, I'd probably call them more or less a tie. But I like big field of views because I like to run at a higher magnification. Typically these days I'm shooting anywhere between 18 to 22 power, so I like that. All right. And then from there, extras. You know, like extra stuff you get in the box, sunshades, throw levers, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, Mark V takes the win there because the Zeiss doesn't come with dick. Just a big white box, all right? So, man, on the surface, you would think that that is a 4-2 victory for the Zeiss. And I don't know how else to call it. You can take these with a grain of salt. Maybe you guys think that the turrets on the Mark V are better. You know, maybe the illumination, you can literally zero it out because you don't care. So even if you zero out the illum, it's 2-3. If you think the turrets are better on the Mark V, then it's a 3-2. Let's take out illumination for a second here, right? And so, you know, where you're at on that. I think objectively speaking, Parallax still, the S3 wins. Let's say glass, you're like, whatever, they're both the same to me. Then that would go here, and it could easily be a, you know, 4-1 or 3-2 victory for the Mark V. So I just want you guys to keep that in perspective. I'm not saying that it's a blowout. Like I say, if you think that this could easily look this way, if you think that the glass is at minimum the same, or you think the Mark V is better, okay, boom. Now you're looking at 3-2. If you think the turrets are the same, then it's 3-1. If you think the turrets are better on the Mark V, it's 4-1. I think, you know, depending on which side of the fence you sit on, if you have one really strong preference one way or the other, then it's not hard to make this a blowout going the other way. All right. But again, my personal opinion is that it sits as follows. So I'll just do this one more time so that you guys can see where I'm at with it. And again, this is my honest, unbiased review. I own both of these scopes, paid for both of these scopes. Turrets, win is here. Illum, win is here. I don't shoot a lot, but I have shot night matches in the past, and they are a ton of fun. And I have attempted, scheduling hasn't worked out, but I have tried to shoot them as well, like the 2 days. So I do at some point want to do that. And, you know, again, when you're competing in scopes of similar price points that have that particular feature, you got to come with it to stay competitive. Otherwise, it's just an automatic win in that particular column for another scope. So if I was comparing this to, let's say, a Burris, and the Burris is the illuminated reticle, well, that's an automatic win for the Burris by objective standards, right? So this is where I sit with it. I think the PR2 is an automatic win. I love that reticle, and the Zeiss is just too thick. Turrets, despite there's less cons with the turrets of the S3 than there are with the turrets of the Mark V. The Mark V windage is pretty bad and definitely needs some help. The S3, really the only con that I have is the fact that it's the two different hex screw sizes to zero it out. Illum, automatic win. PR2 doesn't come illuminated. I won't use a different reticle in a Mark V. Glass, in my opinion, the Zeiss is a winner. Again, I'd say that the Zeiss is like a 9 and the Leupold is an 8, 8.5 within the $2,500 and under scopes, right? And then extras, obviously the Mark V wins. I love the fact that they included a sunshade because that's probably the singular most important accessory, because no scope ever gives you like decent caps except for tangents. And you know, throw levers, dime a dozen. Some people prefer them, some people don't. On the Zeiss, I chose not to run the one that came with it, so I don't really give a shit. But I always appreciate a good sunshade, right? Super, super valuable. So I'll leave this here for you guys. And that's it, man. I've got more reviews on the way of some other products, but I wanted to get this one out there just because I felt like it was a unique opportunity and something that somebody else hadn't done, comparing what I think are the top 2 options in the production class category of scopes. Once again, production class is 2,500 or less. All right. So once again, appreciate you guys for watching. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them down in the comments section below, and I'll be sure to get back to you, as many of you as I can. All right, you guys, thank you for your patience. I know this is a little bit long-winded. I wanted to keep it short, but comparing 2 products is never easy. All right, so appreciate you guys. Stay safe, stay shooting.